Hey, thanks for being here. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 200 is with Clayton English and Glod from War on Drugs.
Doing great. How are you?
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, man, I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to talk because this war on drugs, man, this has been a part of my weekly reader lifestyle all the way back to the second grade, guys.
Come on. Yeah.
So when does it become a world war on drugs instead of just a war on drugs?
Well, that's a big old question, isn't it? That's a whole wide world. Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of look at the history of the war on drugs, and a lot of it, kind of began in America, and we'd like to kind of spread our stinky fingers over everything. And so the U.S., when they started kind of going through a lot of their prohibitionist policies, they didn't want to be alone. And so you kind of look historically, and we put a lot of pressure on other countries to kind of follow suit in what we're doing. So not only has like our U.S. war on drugs impacted the United States, it has had profound impacts across, into Europe and Asia and South America and Central America, and really trying to kind of crack down a lot of the things that we were doing because, yeah, like I said, we didn't want to be alone in this war. We wanted allies and enemies all across the globe.
And it's an international drug market. The drugs more than likely are going to come from other places, so I think it's innately a part of it. It's a global issue.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because, that was one of the things that when we first invaded Afghanistan, one of the things that people said, oh, my God, the poppy plants over there, that's the opium capital of the world. What's going to happen to opium? And it
was a huge component of it, and we're still kind of seeing the ramifications of that today, that we had a lot of soldiers over there that got addicted because of this, but also we were able to control trade markets of that. It all kind of comes together. And for fentanyl, you don't need any of that. You don't need farming.
Small lab.
Right, exactly.
One of the things that always got me was ephedrine was taken off the market. Ooh, it was bad. But what about these other drugs that people are using for painkillers?
You're throwing out everything with the bad. Some of these drugs actually have a purpose. Even fentanyl actually has a purpose in the medical field.
Right.
And it's a great drug for surgeries and doing things. But because people are abusing it, it could look like, and the way people are, it could look like that drug could get taken off altogether. So, Greg, because if I remember correctly, right, it's fentanyl's good because you come out of being induced. And
yeah. It was a miracle drug essentially for surgical operations, invented in the 60s. Your dogs have fentanyl patches. It's like a miracle drug. But to your point, it's kind of amazing how people do have a surgery, they get on these pain pills, and once they actually have some sort of potential substance use issue with them, we cut off and they either start going towards the illegal market or worse. We spoke to Maya Salvitz, who is an addiction expert for the podcast, and she talked about these horrible stories of husbands and wives holding each other's hands while one commits suicide because they can't take the pain anymore. And so I know what you're talking about with the surgery. My dad had knee surgery. He took they gave him, I think, Oxycontin or one of those things. He had one pill. He's like, never again am I taking that. And he just had to grit it out with Advil and, kind of just going through it. So I don't blame you. It's very scary when that stuff happens, because if you do have an issue, we're very quick to cut off that supply and kind of try to just tell you, hey, go clean. And for a lot of people, it's really, really difficult. Yeah. And we put them in really tough situations.
Well, your conversation with Eric Sterling drew me in. Oh, my God. First of all, we're talking about Lynn Bias. And it was such I didn't want it to end because I think you should bring him back because there's still more to his story.
Oh, he has so much. That was one of the things about doing this podcast. Like, it's so much information that, we just tried to make it digestible. And that's definitely a person we would have to get back. And I think we might even have some bonus content with him. So.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. To me, the war on drugs, all of a sudden, ephedrine disappears. Okay, I get it. But yet we still have these other drugs that are just as rampant as all can be. And even North Carolina announced yesterday, well, we're still trying to legalize medical marijuana. And it's like, wait a second. How are we supposed to win this war if they're legalizing everything?
Well, yeah. For the medical aspects of marijuana, I think one of the things that we've just kind of been able to show throughout the podcast is that our current prohibition practices are not accomplishing any of the goals that we want. We're not condoning substance abuse or substance use on the show at all, but just saying that the criminal justice system has been a very poor regulator of this market. But yeah, to your point, I mean, a lot of kind of what is illegal and what is not is fairly arbitrary. I mean, you look at, marijuana at the federal level is still a controlled one substance. That means it has no medical value whatsoever. And obviously that's not the case. Now, there are side effects and harmful negative consequences of habitual use of marijuana. And you see in some of these like weed shops and things like that, you're looking at 80, 90% THC, and that can really mess up a kid at those levels. And so we have this kind of weird relationship with it. But at the same time, there's obviously some benefits. And when you're categorizing that in the same, category as, it's actually, cocaine's a Schedule II substance and, marijuana is a Schedule I. It's all very arbitrary what we allow to be legal, what we allow people to put in their bodies and whatnot. And, evidence and science has not been leading the day on the drug war. It's been much more fear and kind of rash thinking. And that's something that we see throughout this time. There's some, a Len bias happens, or there's a story out of Florida where some kid went crazy on LSD. And then we all start scrambling and, just start prohibiting it instead of saying, like, let's take a deep breath. Let's research this stuff. Let's understand the benefits, the negatives, and move on from there from a regulatory standpoint. And we just are horrible at that as an institution in the United States. And so I think that's the big problem there, is that science has never led with this, or healthcare has never led with this. It's always been kind of fear and kind of government's, politics as usual.
Don't you think?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm still tripping off. You said ephedrine. That's like an old drug. Like, just thinking about how many drugs have gotten canceled and taken off the market. Like I've never actually seen a barbiturate. I remember learning about it in the DARE program, but I have no idea what they are. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Bring back Quaaludes.
Oh yeah, the Quaalude. Hey, that Wolf of Wall Street scene has me very scared.
You're so right about that, because I would love to sit through a DARE program now and see what exactly they're talking about.
Yeah, because I guarantee you half of it wasn't out yet.
So many people have associated the war on drugs with Nancy Reagan, but my God, you guys are one of the very first people to say, no, guys, this actually started with President Richard Nixon.
Yeah, and it probably even goes further back than that. Yeah, I mean, Nixon was obviously, he declared a war on drugs, and he was kind of one of the, the first ones to kind of officially pronounce it a war. But, you kind of look back all the way, we talked to Johan Hari, who has an amazing book, Chase and Scream, and he talks about, how Harry Anslinger kind of took over what's the modern day DEA, after Prohibition. So you have all these agents, you have all this huge government agency that was, cracking down on people being bootleggers and, in the illegal alcohol trade. And they needed something to do. And that kind of started tying into the drug war. And that really is like the impetus and the origin story of the drug war. But yeah, then it follows up through Richard Nixon with marijuana. And all you see is always like we have political opponents. So during that time, it was the Black Panthers, the hippies, kind of this free love movement during the Vietnam War. And it's like, well, how does the government control these people? We can't, charge them with, heavy crimes of murder and, arson. Those are few and far between. But drugs, we can get our hands on that. And so what you see a lot of the time, it's a war on people. Clayton says this all the time. Sorry to steal your line here. It's a war on people, not necessarily a war on drugs. We're able to kind of hit right, exactly. Yeah.
I got to ask you, though, will there ever be a podcast that's based on the drug of choice for the men and women that are coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, and let's be honest, they're coming back from Ukraine too. We just aren't talking about it. But there is a drug of choice, and I think that I don't want to see any late night commercials on TV that said if you were part of. I mean, we need to tackle this now.
Yeah. And so what the drug of choice you're talking about is what? Fill me in. I'm curious.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because they're coming home, but where are they escaping?
Okay.
I want to know so that we can help them now and not stand on the other side of this going, well, crap, we should have known. We should have known. We should have learned from the Vietnam War. We should have learned from all these other, because to this day, we keep hearing about the drug abuse that happened during Vietnam.
Yeah, I think some of that, Greg can probably talk more to it, but some of that is just going to come down to how we treat addiction.
Right.
In general, because it's like I mean, we're joking about it, but it's going to be something else. You know, like fentanyl is now, it's not going to stop probably. So the way we approach people addiction and we treat it like a sickness, if we actually start getting people on the path to being well, I think that's one of the first steps, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Clayton, I think you hit it on the head. And, right now what we're seeing, unfortunately, is, fentanyl really overtake, the American streets. And, really heroin is not going to be a drug that's really out there. And you kind of think to yourself, oh, that's a good thing. But no, it's because fentanyl is kind of overtaking it. And to your point, I think that's our fear, as this, the Ukraine war continues and other people coming back. Obviously, the military has immense, issues with PTSD, mental health issues, substance use when they come back. And so I think we're going to see this again. And I think fentanyl is really going to start being that drug of choice, unfortunately. And that is a really, really dangerous substance. And we don't have a great plan for how we kind of bring people back and move through. We talked to Jesse Gould, who runs an organization that helps people, veterans suffering from PTSD actually go on ayahuasca trips, which is really fascinating. Yep. And, he talks a lot about just how the VA, you go there and you say, I have these issues. And finally, once you're able to see someone after, months and months and months, all they want to do is just pump you with all these other substances. And for him, he was saying it was causing me depression and it was causing me all these things. So he took matters in his own hands. I think that's one area that potentially, could really help our military and troops is kind of looking at some of the therapeutics that are coming out there from psychedelics like MDMA or psilocybin and things like that have shown to really, really actually help with these types of things rather than a lot of the, pharmaceutical company, options and solutions that we have here that really actually drive people much more into depression a lot of the times. It's but to your point, I think we're going to see a lot more substance abuse coming back from people that are serving right now overseas in Ukraine and as we've seen in other wars. Yeah, for sure.
What is so incredible about this podcast is the fact that you're in the front seat of the car with me. You're in my office with me, and you present it in a way that does not offend me. It teaches me. It helps me understand. It's like you're educating the public, and at the same time, you're also saying we can do this. Let's work together. And we've never had a podcast like this before.
Wow.
It was kind of. Oh, go ahead, Clayton. Sorry. Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, it was kind of crazy when we were talking about doing this, and we were like, oh, the war on drugs, that has to be taken as a podcast name, and it wasn't. And I was like, oh, yeah. We were like, well, maybe we're onto something here. That it hasn't really been explored in this way. And really kind of looking through the content of other podcasts, it felt like there was this gap. And so I really appreciate you saying that, because that was exactly what we were trying to do. We really weren't trying to force a narrative or push that, drugs are fine. It was really to show the harmful side effects, the actual realities of what this drug war is, and kind of leading through that time period and how it impacts different points of American life and bring on the best people that we could. And try to make it as entertaining as possible when it's such a sobering issue. But that was kind of the goal, and hopefully we're hitting it.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man.
How did you guys even prepare for that conversation with Eric Andre? Because there's no way that it was just one of those things where you sat down in the studio and said, all right, let's go for this. You guys did some serious show prep on that.
That's my guy. So I know him. I've worked with him before from comedy and stand up, and actually the whole situation that we have, the legal case. I just reached out to him because the same thing had happened to me. So I've been in contact with him for a while. So it was really just kind of me asking hey, would you come down and come over here? And then once he got on board, we just made sure we got everything together, and we wanted to make sure we rolled it out for him.
Well, to be so open though, Clayton, my God. I mean, most people when they get on the microphone, I mean, being on stage is one thing, and sharing your truth up there is one thing. But when you share it through a podcast, oh my God. I mean, I can hit replay 1 billion times.
Yeah. And I think that's what we want this podcast to have. We want it to have legs. We want you to tell somebody else to listen to it. We want you to get together after listening to it and talk about what you heard and do more research. And I also like that Greg's always got a call to action, because it's so much stuff you look at and you get bombarded with information, and it's okay, you kind of feel helpless because you don't know what you can do. Right. And I think we do a pretty good job of letting people know where to begin on getting on the path to get some of these things that, we say we want as a society.
Well, the one thing I've always wondered, though, only because I'm on this side of the drug war, is the fact that, is this a political tool, or do we really have a situation here? Because it seems like every politician is talking about it, but you never see anything done.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It feels like a kind of a utilization that you're able to weaponize when you're in in political power, one way or the other. And it's a lot of grandstanding, it's a lot of rhetoric. It's still this horrible misunderstanding of what addiction is and how to effectively treat it. We talked to Johan Hari, like I talked about before, and he talks about this experiment called Rat Park, where this is where a lot of our addiction knowledge came from. That we put a rat in a cage and we gave him water with cocaine and water without, and finally the rat starts going to the water with cocaine because he has nothing to do. And then 30 years later, someone does this experiment again and makes Rat Park, and it's a bunch of other rats, and you're associating, you have all the food you want, all the wheels you want, all this stuff that you want, and the rats stop going to the cocaine. And it just shows that, we're throwing people essentially in a cage by themselves when we put them in jail with no treatment, no therapy, no nothing. And then we're expecting them to get better. And we have this horrible misrepresentation of what addiction is. And our politicians and our policy continues to essentially go the complete opposite way and actually exacerbate addiction issues rather than just looking at the medical science. And we've gone so far into it now, it's really going to be hard to put the toothpaste back of the tube, because there's been so much misinformation and miseducation about what the drug were. I mean, us, going through the DARE programs and all these other things, we just have this weird misunderstanding of what addiction is and how to actually come on the other side. It's going to take a while, but there are these little glimmers of hope that I think we see people more and more understanding. And a lot of it, unfortunately, has to do with like the opioid epidemic kind of hitting, a lot of suburban and rural areas now, rather than just kind of being an inner city issue. And so more people are opening their eyes to this.
Yeah, I think that's what's got the politicians like being a little bit more open to understanding ways to treat addiction, because I think before it was just that fear campaign, that fear mongering. These people are animals on drugs. If somebody's on crack, they're gone. If somebody smokes meth, there's nothing you can do with them. So I think now that people are seeing it like in so many different forms and hitting people that are close to them and it's actually in their community, I think that's increased the politicians' ability to kind of want to, I guess, talk about it. Greg, you're the one on the policy stuff. So, yeah.
Well, Clayton, I got to tell you something. You being creative, I come from a creative world. I believe that addiction starts with creativity. And I think that people can't feed that monster, so they go searching for things. And I wish people would start talking about that. What are you doing with your creativity? Please find an answer, because I don't need you to go to drugs.
Yeah, that connection, that community. For me, it was comedy, it was, and then also, unfortunately, comedy has like a blueprint of what drugs will do to you. So you kind of like, if you got to have something that you want to do so that it keeps you from just going into trying to numb your whole life away.
That's right.
I think we talked about that on that Dr. Phil thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. You guys, I could spend 2 hours or 2 days with you. I mean, this is a subject that needs to have a conversation, and I'm so blessed to hear your podcast. And I cannot wait to find out what you guys are going to continue to add to this. The War on Drugs, which is now on iHeartRadio. Please come back to this show anytime. The door is always going to be open for you.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, we're really excited as we keep rolling out episodes every Wednesday. So definitely subscribe to us wherever you find podcasts. And I really appreciate the time. And we'd love to come back and continue to chat about this as things come up.
Yeah, give us a listen.
Absolutely. You be brilliant today, okay?
You too.
You too, man. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you.